What's going on today, Internet? Selfish here with Retro Spec. Today we're going to take a look at the Anbernic RG34XX. This here is a Game Boy Advance clone that copies just about every aspect of the Game Boy Advance. Many companies have tried to do Game Boy Advance clones over the last couple of years, and many have failed. But Anbernic has actually pulled it off by taking pointers of every possible aspect of the device, for better or worse. And that's the caveat we're going to focus on today. Let's take a look. Before we get going, this handheld here was provided me by ToRetro for the purpose of review. No money has exchanged hands. They don't have any input on what I put into this video, and they're not going to see it before you do. Now, I had actually intended on skipping the unboxing on this because it is kind of a first look video, but then I was like, it's the first look video, we should do the unboxing. But then Anbernic came out and they made the box look almost identical to the box, or at least their kind of portrayal of the box that originally came out with the Game Boy Advance. Looks very much like this. I'll try to throw an image of it up on the screen for you if I can find one. But this is pretty much what the GBA box looked like when it came out back in the day. And so that's pretty cool, actually. So they cloned all the way to the box. I know a lot of people are excited because they thought Anbernic was changing up their boxes to actually, like, you know, include, I don't know, color other than silver or gold. But I think that this is just kind of a one-off because of the situation that it is. This is very much a love letter to the Game Boy Advance. Not the first love letter we've looked at to the Game Boy Advance this year, mind you. But this one here is going to be the closest. Spec-wise, it's almost identical for shape, size, and all that kind of stuff, even ergonomics, but we'll see that as we go into it. We'll open the box up here real quick. We do have our 34XX right there in the box here. As typical, we do have our thing here, and this one actually comes with a screen cover, so they want us to protect this one, which is great. Our little screen wipey things. This one even has a lanyard. I don't know that I'll use that, but it does have a lanyard, which is kind of cool. And we do have an origami accordion, which gives us all kinds of the same things that all these do. I don't know if they just change the pictures on them and give us the same thing every time, but this has all the same information all the other Anbernics do. So that's cool, I guess. They got to be getting really good at writing the same information over and over again. Now, if only I could figure out how to close these things. There we go. And in here, we have our Type-C to Type-A cable. As always, I have a drawer full of these, and I'm still glad they put these things in the box. I don't know, I break cables too. And if I don't, my family does. They're good to have around. Into the 34XX. I'm going to say the name of this wrong. I don't know how many times I've had to edit this already. This is like the shortest named Anbernic handheld of the year. Last one got the shortest name. Just saying. Just throwing it out there. And here we go. And there she is in all of her glory. They asked me if I wanted that original indigo that they came in. I actually really like some of the new modded ones that have come out, so I thought the green was kind of a spicy color. That'd be kind of fun. I do like green handhelds. We don't get enough of them, and so I went with this color, and I'm really glad that I did. It looks really nice. Look at that thing. All right, well, before we get too far into this, we will go into the I/O here real quick. Let's get this other crap out of the way, and we'll start talking about it. All right, we will start at the top like we always do. We do have shoulder and trigger buttons. Our triggers being here where the game cards normally would be, and our shoulders where the shoulders typically would be. Very cool. I do like the design and everything. They did, again, try to keep everything true to form of the original Game Boy Advance. We do have our menu button right here. We do have an HDMI hole, which is nice. You don't have to do the modification like a lot of people do on the GBAs. You do have a Type-C hole, and then you also do have a reset button right there. On the back here, we do have some nice ergonomics. You can't see them. This is like old school ergonomics right here. You don't need the bumps on the outside. They go on the inside in the old days. So you do have these cool little swoops right here. This is actually just to kind of hold your fingers from going over that battery compartment. And back when you used actual batteries, you had to keep it flat because you needed a square area to keep your battery in. So that's the story behind that anyways. They even kept with the original screw holes on the Game Boy Advance and the screw holding battery compartment in. Looks pretty good. I think they did a great job. Even the sticker is true to form of the original GBA sticker there. I mean, it doesn't say Nintendo or have the service code on it to call in if you have problems, but it is true to form as far as where it is and what have not. On the left-hand side over here, we just have our bumper, and on the right-hand side, another bumper. So kind of cool that they put these bumpers on here, right? They just look nice. They just added to the original GBA aesthetic. On the bottom here, we do have our power button, and then instead of a wheel, like the original Game Boy Advance had for volume, we do have, well, I guess it's kind of a wheel, but this is one of those slider styles where it's just an up and down notch. So it's just like hitting the button up and down, but it is in the form of a wheel, and it jogs back to center. which is kind of nice. We also do have a 3.5 hole here for your music listening and or game listening needs, but this does have a music player built in, so if you wanted to get real funky with it on the headphone side, you could do that there. On the front here, we do have actually ABXY buttons. One thing that's really cool and unique about this is to get the X and Y in here. Now you can see X and Y on here, sort of, if you look really closely, and that's because they use the braces that actually give the button stability in order to make an X and a Y. So that is actually what you're seeing there, is the stability inside of it, making your X and your Y. But they did color match them because the original GBA did not have these buttons here to begin with. And obviously your A, B, but your face buttons, I feel pretty good. They feel pretty much like a normal Anbernic face button. Nothing real special, but they do have a decent amount of like pretty quick bounce back to them. They're a little louder than some, but they're not terrible. The X and Y are a little bit smaller than the A and B, and I think that's just part of trying to get them to flush and sit in here because you only had so much space to work with. I think they did a pretty good job both hiding them and making them usable at the same time. We do have our speaker button right here. It's a single speaker, and before I forget, we do have a power indicator up here, which is also where it is on the original GBA. We do have start and select down here, nice and quiet. I mean, talk about attention to detail. If you look at this, they're actually carved in isn't right. They're actually engraved start and select just like they are on the original GBA in these channels that go straight to the button switches. So that's pretty cool. They kept to that. And then, you know, this D-pad is pretty tiny, and Anbernic has been putting a lot of way too small D-pads on handhelds this year, but this one here takes the cake as far as its functionality, as far as its movement. It's a little sloppy, even for how small it is. It has a weird pivot to it, and it's actually more or less what came on the GBA, which I believe is what Anbernic was going for here, was to try to get it as close to the original GBA D-pad as possible. I honestly wish they would have just put a bigger normal D-pad in here, but I understand where they were going with this. I just, for usability-wise, I think it would have been better to have a better D-pad in here. But you know what? It's their machine, and I mean, you can't get any damn closer. One thing I did forget too when we were looking at the top is we do have our SD holes, both 1 and 2, or OS and games, and these are sitting where the original game card slot was. So your games are still plugging in where your games have always plugged in on a Game Boy Advance. They're just doing it here on this RG34XX. So same spot, pretty cool. That's actually a really cool detail, and I forgot to mention it when we were there. And then we do have our screen. We are looking at a 3.4-inch IPS display. It is 720 by 480, and the name 34XX comes from 3.4 or 3.4-inch display. If you're not familiar how Anbernic codes their handhelds, it's always by display size. So your naming convention is based off of what display you have in it. This is Anbernic's first 3.4-inch out of the XX series, which is why this did not get a letter, which is why it has the shortest name other than the 28XX. It ties for the shortest name. Okay, I was close. It ties for the shortest name. While this powers up, we're just going to go through a couple of specs real quick. We're not going to go through the whole thing because this is an XX device from Anbernic, so it is going to have pretty much the same thing as everybody else. But this is an H700 quad-core ARM Cortex-A53. It is at 1.5 gigahertz as far as its frequencies go, and this 3.4-inch IPS display at 720 by 480 is actually 3 times pixel perfect ratios of the original GBA. So if you play a GBA game on here, it will be 3 times picture perfect to the original GBA without making any changes in the software at all, just based off of the display itself, which is phenomenal. This does have WiliWili, which I believe is Billy, but it's a different version of it. It does have Moonlight, and it does have multiplayer through Wi-Fi because it does have Wi-Fi. Also, your HDMI out is something that's new to this, and instead of having to put batteries in it, you do have a Type-C charger, which is pretty dope. Your menus here are like any other Anbernic that we have looked at this year. So you do have your game room, you have your RA game, which is typically where you're going to spend all your time unless you want something over PS1, which becomes a little tricky when you don't have joysticks. Just pointing that out. Now you should be able to hit the power button and use your D-pad as a joystick, which maybe it'll work better as a joystick than a D-pad. We'll find out. I haven't tried it yet, but it is a possibility. You do have your app center, and in here you are going to find your video and audio stuff, as well as your WiliWili, which again I believe is just another Billy. It's kind of like the YouTube over in China. You do have an ebook reader. I haven't opened the videos folder yet, but I'm hoping that there is going to be a trailer for this handheld in there, because that's what they've been doing this year, and I don't know why. Oh yeah, there we go. I find it weird that they start all of them with country music. Alright, so you do have your video player, so if you wanted to load up some videos of your own on here, you could do that and watch them, or if you want to take my YouTube videos and load them up on here so you can watch them on the bus when you don't have internet access, by all means, just make sure that after you watch them, you go back to my page and you hit the like button for me. That'd be fantastic. We should be able to get out of here by hitting the menu button. So we do have the ebook reader on here. I haven't loaded anything on here. Everything on this cart right now is what came on the cart when I got it. We would have the ability typically to put my comics and stuff on here like I would on a lot of other handhelds, and we'll do that on another video because we are going to come back to this. Again, this is just a first look video so we can kind of get through here. here. They do continue to clean up this UI, which is really nice inside of here. Just every time you get a new device, it's just a little bit better. And then they're also at the same time updating all the other devices, right? So the entire line of handhelds got an update when this came out, which is really nice to see that Anbernic continues to work on this. So you have your favorites, you have your history, you have a search button, search bar. You do have your settings keys. So in here, you're going to be able to make all your settings changes that you want to do, including getting to things like RetroArch. You know, if you want to add retro achievements before getting to a game, anything like that, that would be available within this menu system. So that would be like here, you can get a RetroArch. You can reset RetroArch if you want to go back to stock, if you screw something up. My word of the wise is never update your controller in RetroArch once you get a handheld like this, because once you do that, you won't be able to access with this controller that's built in. So then you're going to have to reset RetroArch. Background settings, sounds, picture, all that kind of stuff. We will take a look at a couple of games here real quick. This isn't going to be a real long video. Probably just going to focus maybe on GBA just for this video specifically. Maybe we'll try something out with another system, and then we'll just wrap it up real quick. I'm going to play with this for the next week or so, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to do another video on this. It's a little bit more in depth. Also, I was going to do a MuOS video on this because MuOS is available on this. I didn't want to come into it with that, so I may look at that in the next video as well. By then, I'm hoping we'll have at least one, if not two more custom firmwares, so we might be able to take a look at a couple of different things. So right now we'll take a look at a couple of games and then we'll kind of come to a conclusion. We're gonna start off here with Alien Hominid on GBA. Just a really easy one to emulate. Also gives us a little bit of, using the controls. Pretty much every control gets used in this game, so it gives us a good idea. Well, not every control, I guess we don't use the shoulders, but it gives us a good idea of how this is going to react. And we get to, get rid of some CIA bad guys or whatever these guys are. Some three-letter word guys. You want to get back to your menu, or if you want to get into your RetroArch settings, everything is available here. All you have to do is hit your menu button on the top here. This will get you into RetroArch. So if you want to look at anything that's in here, as far as changing your retro achievements, if you want to change your resolution, if you want to add any kind of filters to this in a different system, if you wanted to add the borders and things like that, you can do all that here in RetroArch, and you can just hit it again to resume. You should be able to hit start and select at the same time twice. Nope. So it's select and menu, and you can exit as well instead of having to go through all the menus there in RetroArch. None of these games should be a problem for this. With the H700 SoC in here, this thing is pretty much a powerhouse when it comes to Game Boy Advance systems. We should be able to play some Dreamcast on here, a little bit of N64, some PSP, stuff like that. Now, you do have the disadvantage, though, you do not have joysticks on here. So what that comes down to is a lot of systems that use joysticks won't work. Now, you're going to get most of the PS1 library on here. PS1 didn't actually need the joysticks when it came out, so you will be able to play PS1 games on here. Most games were always tailored to play with or without them, so should be a pretty good transition there for you. I don't remember what the... what's my boost? All right, so we're going to play Crazy Taxi here, and I think what's going to happen, we're using our D-pad as a joystick to be able to get around on here. And if we weren't, we would just hit the menu button, or no, sorry, we'd hit the power button once real quick. You just go like that, and then it definitely turns into it. There we go. Now we're a joystick. Oh boy, this is not the easiest one to play Crazy Taxi on, I'm not gonna lie. So I just give you a really quick look at the RG34XX. Now again, we will do a deeper dive, and we will actually look at some custom firmware for this as well. I definitely am excited to try some of that out. The stock firmware has gotten really good with Anbernic. We could probably even try to get away with like a modified stock version of the firmware would probably be fine. What you really want is some more emulation tweaking. Anbernic just hasn't really gotten to that point in their firmware builds yet. And I do kind of fear if they change out of the H700 SoC that they are going to have to start over with their firmware, which might be why they're not changing out of the H700 SoC, which is bad in two ways. We're not getting any new performance out of the Anbernics, and we're just not getting anything new really at all. We're just getting the same handhelds over and over again in new packages. But hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully they have figured out or have begun work on another SoC with a new firmware, but they've done a really good job. This is a very mature firmware for a stock OS. We don't see stock OSs kind of across the board do well at all. In fact, we kind of expect them to fail when they come out, which is why our awesome community does such a good job of creating new operating systems to use on these. And we all know that some of the manufacturers just poach those and use those with their stock OSs without permission. At least Anbernic's not doing that anymore. There is a lot of good going on with this handheld. The ergonomics suck, and they always have. Since I was a kid, they sucked, but you can get used to it. You do kind of have to hold it a little different, especially with bigger hands. So if you are looking to get this, remember you were probably a child the last time you played a Game Boy Advance, and you probably had smaller hands. If your hands never grew, I'm sorry, or you're welcome, or I don't know what to say. It depends on how big they were to begin with or how comfortable you are with having tiny hands. But if your hands have grown like most of ours have, this is not exactly the most comfortable. it can be kind of awkward, though you can awkwardly play it and not have it be uncomfortable. The other thing is this D-pad almost pound for pound matches the stock GBA. I wish I had one here to show you, but it pretty much is the exact same D-pad as they have going here. I think this is probably the closest you would be able to clone it. I mean, I'm sure somebody will figure it out and get closer, but right now this is probably the closest ever been cloned to the original GBA D-pad. And the thing about the original GBA D-pad is it wasn't very good, and that, which sucks when it's your only control function, right? You don't have joysticks or anything, and you just have that D-pad. It never was very good, and it feels like 6 steps back for Anbernic to go to this D-pad. Now, I don't think that they're going to put this D-pad on future devices. I think it's specifically for this in order to make this as authentic as possible. If it's not, I'm sorry for saying that I thought it was. And Anbernic, get your shit together. But I think it's going to be okay, because I think that they're not going to use this. Now, as I said at the beginning, I wish they would have gone. And it's the one thing that they were going to do that was going to go out of their way that wasn't going to be like the original would have been to put one of Anbernic's current D-pads in this handheld, because that would have made a world of difference as far as gameplay ability. Now, this isn't the worst D-pad to have. Oddly enough, 3D systems that require joysticks, because if you're using this as your joystick, it has a pretty decent pivot for the joystick itself. It's an awkward pivot to use as a D-pad, but if you're going to use it as a joystick, it works pretty well. Everything else on here is pretty amazing. These right here, I mean, when you do hold this device, those do not, they don't sit where they did when I was a kid, but they still work because they actually hold my fingers from sliding over the battery door, so that's fine. I think these are in the right spot. It is the correct type of ergonomics for this in a time, again, when ergonomics meant the opposite of what ergonomics means today, and we all have back problems, so we were probably wrong back then, but none of us were lifting with our knees. Everything else on here is pretty much the same. You can look at other videos, you'll see one for one that if you put this up against another GBA, they look almost identical, and size for size, they're pretty much identical. So I do like the fact that they did use this back here in this area for putting your game cards in. That it wasn't necessary. They didn't need to do that. With this H700, it would have been easier for them to put them on the bottom. So for the fact that they actually built this shelf here and put them out there, I think was pretty awesome. Just right where the games have always gone, they're still going into this handheld as well. We will get a lot more into the weeds on this on another day when I have a little bit more time to play with it. If you have any questions or anything you want me to test out or try on this, I will try to get them into my next video. Just leave that down in my comment section down below, and I'll play with it here over the next week and a half, and I'll see how many of those I can incorporate into my video. If you want to pick up the Anbernic RG34XX and help support the channel, there's a link down in my thingamabob to ToRetro. They're the ones who sent this to me, and thank you ToRetro for sending it. Purchasing from them will help support the channel, but also on top of that, I'm going to give you a discount. If you look on the screen here, we have discount code RETROSPEC. Yep, that's the name of the channel, not even trying to hide it. Also, our promo code for ToRetro. Use that, save yourself some money, and help support the channel. It's like a win for everybody. But I think that's all I got for you today. Don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, share this video with your friends, because sharing helps grow the channel, and also sharing is caring. And that's the most important part about sharing, because sharing is caring, and we care about each other here, and we're trying to build this community. So, you know, let's see how many more people we can get in here. Also, YouTube thinks they're going to like this video that's up on the top up here. I don't know what it is, but YouTube says you're going to like it, and I never talk back to YouTube. If they tell me to do something, I do it. So, you know, you should probably check that out. But that's all I got for you today. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.